Hello all, my name is Erta the Wanderer, and I've come out of the jungle today once again to talk to one of our most esteemed generals, the Great Lizard Wizard. How are we doing, Wizard?
I'm doing fairly well. How are you?
So far, so good. Today we looks like we're going to be delving into the realms of water and nightmare. We're talking the elusive Idoneth Deepkin. Probably one of the oldest currently competitive books, but still good enough to play with the big boys because they're very good at the one thing they do.
Yeah, this was like what, the second or third book after Legions of Nagash came out?
Yeah,
Because it was right after Daughters of Cain.
mhm. Corn might have also been in there, but yeah, it was in the first three. But despite that, both them and Daughters of Cain are still doing well.
Yeah, this is actually what started the Activation Wars meta. Um,
More's the pity.
like, yeah, this came about from Idoneth. Um, but they're a super solid book. Um, some of their units haven't aged super well. Like when they first came out, their base, like their everything was good. It all had the elf effect. Like generally in
Hmm.
Warhammer games, elves are just better at everything than everyone else. Um,
One would wonder why.
like point for pound. And so like it had that sort of elf effect where like all their stuff just stat for stat was better than everyone else's units. That's really not the case anymore. It's on par with all the other stuff. Everything else has caught up to it.
Mm.
But they're still a fantastic army.
Yeah, that's the same thing with a lot of early books, like Flesh Eater Courts and these ones, and Daughters of Cain for that matter. They started out unbelievably powerful, oppressively so, but have sort of fallen back into the middle of the road as time went on.
Yeah, honestly, the nerfs, and this is an aside, but the nerfs that Flesh Eater and Hedonites of Slanesh got, those don't need to exist anymore. Like you could just straight up get rid of those, and it would be perfectly fine. Wouldn't be broken.
To be fair,
Um,
I do think that the fight first, even when charged, should never be a thing.
yeah, for Gristlegore, I can see that.
Yeah,
Um, but
it's just
I
one of
don't
the
know.
most painful things to deal with, even for a good player. It's just tedious.
Yeah, but there's so much shooting now, right? And like Gristlegore just is laughably bad against shooting.
True.
Um, so I just don't see it being a huge meta problem. Like, sure, it might be bad if you're.
Yeah. At that point, it's just an on.
Nope, I can't think of an army.
Yeah. At that point, it's just an on or off switch. Does your opponent have shooting? Well, you lose. Do they not? Well, you win. And
Well, like
not
I'm even
sure
thinking
that's.
through armies. Like, let's say you're playing a melee version of Stormcast Eternals, uh, you'll still be okay against Fleshter Courts with that rule in effect. I don't know. Like, I see how I think it added an interesting element to the game of having like a no bubble on a behemoth.
Mm,
As we go further down this rabbit hole tangent. But I don't know. I don't think it's. I think there's things in the game powerful enough now that those could you could roll them back.
fair
Um,
enough. But that is one of the things that we keep having to put an eye on, the problem with monsters, and Idoneth struggles from this quite a bit.
yeah, the Leviathan, like its battle sheet, its War Scroll card, it's a solid behemoth and it does cool things.
But not for
Um,
600 points.
but not for 600 points exactly. Um, like I'm still hard to sell on a Lariel for the amount of points she cost,
And
and
she's
she is
better.
way better than a Leviathan. Um,
Yeah, a bubble of cover is nice, but they already get that turn one, and they have a spell that does that anyway, so.
yeah, I think if I'm being so, there's two major allegiance abilities for Idoneth, and Forgotten Nightmares is part of what really helps Idoneth remain competitive.
Yep, and
Um,
it's one of the things that makes them particularly hard for us to deal with.
yeah, especially if you're playing a Fangs of Sotek style list or Thunder Lizards. Um, but missile weapons can only target an Idoneth unit if it's the closest visible unit. So their ability to screen and force you to shoot targets you don't want to shoot
Like
is phenomenal.
Yeah, like anvil eels who are fast enough to get right where they
Exactly.
need to go and ignore rend. Oh,
Yeah,
hello,
this is why
salamanders.
Idoneth is uh like I would say KO would be the S tier army if it weren't for the fact that like all the back of A and top of B tier armies have a really good match against it.
Mm.
And Idoneth is still very prevalent in the meta, and Idoneth has a fantastic matchup against KO.
I mean, they are
Uh,
the best Alpha Strike army in the game, and it's not close.
yeah, yeah, they're fantastic. Um, yeah, they're just amazing. So they have that's their passive battle trait. There are other battle traits passive, but it changes. It's something you have to play around. So this is very
The
similar to like
Tides of Death.
yeah, it's got that Daughters of Cain feel where like you stack up to different abilities, except this was just a different effect for each one.
Mm.
Um,
I was hoping to see the same sort of thing with Lumineth, have this just be an elf thing, but looks like they decided this wasn't good game design.
yeah, which is too bad because I really liked it, and I
Mm.
specifically liked the Tidecaster that interacted with it. But you've got low tides. This happens in the first round or
First
yeah,
and
battle
fifth
round of the game.
normally.
In this battle round, all units with this battle trait are treated as being in cover. So not only do you have to shoot the closest, they're in cover. So that's like our ability as Seraphon to alpha strike them is greatly reduced by those two things.
Mm.
Battle round two is Flood Tide. Um, all Idoneth units during Flood Tide with the battle trait can run and still shoot or charge. They can't do both. They got to do one or the other. Um,
Most of the time, it's run and charge because 16 flying movement followed by with an auto 6 run and then
yeah,
charging means they can go over the entire map in a single turn.
and generally speaking, you're still going to see elves put into deep strike or ills put into deep strike.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but on those games like Total Commitment and other games where you're not allowed to have reserves, or where they want to start controlling an objective because they're going to make us go first because we're way more drops, then they can put their ills on the table, tag the objective at the end of your turn when control's determined, and then run away from it because they can run in charge and they're super speedy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's definitely something we have to be aware of, especially as Seraphon. And then this is what started Battle Round 3, the activation meta. Um, all of the Idoneth units fight at the start of the combat phase, one after the other, until all their fights are resolved, and then their opponent gets to activate. Um,
Bleh. Not a
yeah,
fan of the activation wars, but
this is
uh,
normally like a cleanup phase for them.
mhm.
Like,
Granted, it's very well telegraphed. You know when to be worried about this. You know when to set
yes,
up to make sure that this doesn't hurt you as badly as it could. It's still going to
yes,
hurt. They're going to send
mhm,
everything at you, and you're going to lose a third of your army in one turn.
yeah, yep,
But it's not the end of the world because,
mm,
uh, unlike a lot of the activation wars, there's ways to play around it. It's not a random thing that you have to hope they roll twos on.
yeah. It's a known factor. And then the battle round 4 is ebb tide. Uh, Instead of run and shoot or run and charge, they can retreat and shoot or charge. But again, not both.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's also huge because if you're hoping to screen and tie up and lock down, all of a sudden they've got ills who can retreat and charge with a massive amount of movement
And they can retreat over
and
your troops.
bonuses to charges, and they have fly. So their ability to reach and grab objectives cannot be underestimated. Battle round 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to have a significant lead or have their forces incredibly dwindled by the time turns 3 and 4 come around.
Yeah.
It's really like a clock on the game, which is why the Tidecaster is so cool because they can inverse the order of the tide chart, and then any
Mo-
round after 5, it just repeats.
yep.
Uh,
Most of the time, they use the Tidecaster to be able to fight on two, fight first on two,
Yes.
Especially with their deep strike list, this can be very potent.
Oh yeah, it can be huge, especially if because chances are they're outdropping us as Seraphon. They make
Everyone
you go
outdrops
first.
us.
They do their Alpha Strike. If they get a double turn, you might be done. That can easily be game. So
Hmm.
understanding that, planning around it, knowing how to screen, um, and uh, then we'll talk more on tactics on the other end. But one weakness about Idoneth is that they are a very elite army. So anytime you can force them to have to play and consider the entire table, I've been lucky and I've got to play Matt Pashby, who's a phenomenal Age of Sigmar player and an amazing Idoneth player.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah,
I've been able to play him a couple times at events and done well. I had a minor defeat and a minor victory. So it's always been able to time on the objectives, and that's what keeps the game going.
it's very much a
Um,
positioning game. It's often
yeah,
good to
it's
have two layers of screens because they can often jump there for your first.
yep, which is a much bigger ask for Seraphon now.
Oh yeah,
Um,
back then when
like
you just had hundreds of skinks, it was not
yeah,
easy, but still doable.
yeah. I
Now,
mean, you've got two engine of the gods. Chances are by turn two, you've put on 20 skinks just from that.
oh,
Um,
if I was only putting on 20 skinks, I was failing. But
Oh yeah, but then like you have all your summoning apparatus. Like we were flooding skinks. Like normally my first turn I was dropping 40 skinks on the table easily.
yeah, it was
Additional.
rare not to get 50 or more.
Yeah. Yep.
But neither here nor there. A good thing to do if you know you're up against Idoneth is to get a cue card of the Tides of Death. You need to know when these things are happening, and it's hard to remember them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah,
Uh,
and,
their command traits aren't really worth going over. They exist. Be aware of them. Most of them just buff the general.
which is
Like
never really useful.
yeah, like they're okay. Like reroll charge rolls or reroll hit rolls of or wound rolls of one. Add attack characteristic. Add wounds. Like they're all okay. Um, but it's that sort of like old beat stick hero command traits that you used to see in first edition of Sigmar.
Mm,
It hadn't quite transferred to the like support toolkit command traits that you see now.
right. It might some of these might be good on an aspect of the storm, but no one runs aspects of the storm
Yeah.
because he's kind of bad.
There are a couple artifacts that are worth mentioning. The first is Cloud of Midnight.
Oh lord.
In
Yep.
yeah, specifically for Fangs of Sotek, this is huge in how you play around it. And bear in mind Forgotten Nightmares, which is you can only shoot the closest. Cloud of Midnight is once per battle at the start of any phase, and any hero can bear it. That's Idoneth. They can declare that they're going to release the Cloud of Midnight, and if they do, they cannot be targeted for attacks, spells, or abilities for the rest of that phase. But then they also can't use attack spells or abilities for the rest of the phase. So
Yep.
what that means is they can throw a hero up front, pop
And now
that
you can't
artifact.
shoot them at
Yeah,
all.
you see them, so they're the one that has to be the target. You see them, they are closest. You have line of sight, but you can't target them. So it just you don't get to shoot. Um,
And they don't have any shooting units that are
exactly.
heroes.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yep. Um, so it's incredible. And it might not also just be shooting. They can use it in any of those phases that they want. But specifically for how it's going to hurt Seraphon most often will be from shooting.
Hmm.
Um,
They're just
there's the Whirl Shell, which you used to see occasionally. Once per battle at the start of their hero phase, they can say the bearer will use it. If they do so, pick an enemy unit with a 9 that's visible, roll 2d6. If it's greater than their bravery, subtract 1 from hit rolls for the rest of the battle.
rest of the
Um,
game.
or rest of the game, yeah. This used to be super popular, um, but I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal anymore because I think
It's definitely not.
battalions. Oh, go ahead.
It's definitely not a threat to us because our bravery is so high.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless you're
Um,
running coalesced, and then beware. But even then.
Well, yeah, especially if it's like coalesce salamanders and they only got to beat like a 7 and then you're on 4s and 3s. Like that's a pretty significant nerf to an expensive unit.
A very
Um,
expensive unit. And yeah, salamanders aren't a terribly good pick against Idoneth because they have rend
yeah,
immune.
not if you're trying to list Taylor for Idoneth.
Yeah, because they have rend immune eels
Yeah.
that can force you to fight them, and
Yep.
salamanders are kind of crap without their rend.
The other thing though that you will sometimes see is the Bioshock shell. This used to be put on the Achillean King, who's the hero that makes Ill's battle line, and so it's always in every list.
Hmm.
Because they would do the little Soul Squire point thing and charge the King in as well, and then blow them up on your support heroes, so that you couldn't like try and auto pass Battle Shock and other things. So Bioshock Shell is just a relic. It's once per game at the start of the combat phase. They use it. All enemy units within 3 inches take D3 mortal wounds. Um, so if they have the Bioshock shell, just be aware of it. But Cloud of Midnight's the main artifact that you're going to have to watch out for.
Yep, you'll see it in every list because malign sorcery artifacts aren't a thing anymore, and they have pretty bad ones overall.
Yep.
But
The other artifacts really aren't worth covering. Um, Obviously, if your opponent's like, I have this thing, uh, you want to ask what it is. I guess you might see Coral Ring come up if they're trying to do the old Fear Bomb tactic.
not
So
much
if
of a
you're
thing anymore.
Yeah, but if you're playing Coalesced, it could be. So if you're playing Coalesce and they say they have the Coral Ring, just know it's a Fear Bomb and you want to play around that.
Yep. Let's see, on to units. We just should we start with heroes first?
Do we care about the lores? Like most of them are pretty
No,
meh.
I've never actually cared about them casting spells at me. They've got a good one that
The
like is a
Tidecaster, the base one.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
The Tidecaster spell is just they don't have any double casters, and their base spell is already too good to not use, and they're never
Yep.
taking more than one Tidecaster.
And the rituals are never going off. They have rituals. Just know that a bunch of their heroes are priests and they have rituals. And if there's enough of them on the table, they're more likely to go off. They're all pretty meh. Like they can take away fly. That might matter. They can heal some wounds. They really don't matter. Um, but they exist. Their terrain piece is impactful though.
Oh, very
Uh,
much so.
it's a 6+ save after save for them.
Hmm.
Um, if they're near it, and it can either be set up as one big piece or two little pieces.
But that's not why
Um,
this thing is scary. This thing is scary because eels fly and you don't.
exactly. So they can use it as a wall that they can go over. They can use it as terrain that they can hide on top of and then leave with ease. Um, it just
Yeah,
lets them play with a lot of movement.
great for
Um,
blocking. They can even put it in your deployment zone, can't they?
yep.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is
No, they
before
can.
they had. Well, this is before they had bad terrain rules, so you can get
Yeah.
it wherever. So,
But yeah, they get a 6+ save after save as long as their unit's wholly within 6 inches. And then if you're within 3 inches, I think it's in your hero phase. They roll a dice. On a 4+, you take a mortal wound. On a 6, you take D3 mortal wounds for each unit that's within 3 inches of the ship.
mm-hmm.
Um, there's two. They've got sub factions, but Futon is the one you're going to see.
Hmm.
Uh, it lets them re-roll hit rolls of 1 for Futon units
Which is
that are
pretty good.
affected by Flood Tide. Yep, and Tides of Death. Also, anytime they'd be affected by the Ebb Tide ability, they're instead affected by the Flood Tide ability. So anytime they would be able to uh,
Retreat and charge.
retreat, now instead they can run. Um, which is also important if there's a Tidecaster, because that means they start
With
being
run
able
and
to run and
charge.
charge, and then they go into fighting at the start of combat.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And then
so,
run and charge again, and
yep.
then
And then all their mounts get to reroll wound rolls of 1. So a lot of times they're rerolling ones to hit and to wound on other things they care about. Um, yep, that's the one to be aware of. There's other ones. None of them are bad, but that's by far the best one, an easy choice.
Yep.
So that's definitely the one to expect to see.
Yeah, the thing with Idoneth that really hurts them is they have one trick. Everything else
Mhm.
in their book is so painfully mediocre,
Yep.
which is a shame because they have some of the best models in the game. But all the cool
Yeah, I
stuff,
love the Namarati model units.
mm, Lotan, the turtle, the
Hmm.
aspects, sharks until recently, all of these looked amazing but played badly.
Yep. They've got a couple of battalions. Um, None of them are bad, but the one you will see most often is Royal Council, just because it brings three heroes that every Idoneth list is going to have. It has a king, it has a Tidecaster, it has a Soul Scryer. Um, it adds 3 inches to the movement characteristics of a unit you pick. If the general is near those other two heroes, he picks a unit wholly within 12 and they get +3 to move.
Mm.
But
It's
people are taking it for other reasons. But it's still something like if someone brings it, make sure you're adding 3 inches to your pre measures just in case.
mm,
Um,
it's a thing. Most of the time they use it just to for the non-battalion effects of taking a battalion.
yeah, they want lower drops. They want a command point to start the game with. They want artifact, whatever.
Yeah, less common now because you told me, as you said earlier, malign sorcery is not a thing.
Yep.
So, but still
Uh,
there.
the Eidolons are okay. These are the big guys with the water cloaks. One of the coolest models that
Yeah,
Games
yeah,
Workshop
the
has ever
aspects,
made.
the
Yeah,
aspect of the storm and the aspect of the sea. They look so cool.
they and the combat one isn't a joke. Uh,
Well, not as much of a joke as a lot of things.
I mean, anything with 4 attacks, threes and twos, Ren 2 damage, uh, that isn't a behemoth is
Oh, that's right.
respectable.
They get lookouts or
Exactly, and they've got a 3+ save, 12-inch movement, 12 wounds. Like it's still a good hero. The problem is it's not as good as Ills.
yeah.
Like it's good. Even the wizard one
The problem I
was
have.
really good when it came out,
Mm-hmm.
but now chaos is good. So there's a lot of things with 10 bravery. Death is good, so there's a lot of things with 10 bravery.
And we exist,
Uh,
so it doesn't matter to us.
Seraphon's good, so there's a lot of things with 10 bravery.
And
Um,
even back then, it's got a painfully short range.
it does, and there's no bonuses to casting because this came out like when death was the only thing with consistent bonuses to casting.
Yeah.
Uh,
And technically us.
yeah, but our spells were shit, so it didn't
Yeah.
matter.
We didn't have spells. We didn't have spells.
uh, yeah, we had endless spells, and that was it.
I don't know
So
how you
it
do
helped,
that, but you did.
when you're over 30 inches away and you get that Bowen Vortex, that
Yep.
+1.
But yeah, if you see one of these, then their army is a vanity project, and the proper thing to do is ooh and ah because their things are so cool.
Yeah, they're beautiful models.
Yep.
Um,
In the
but the
same
combat one's the only one that you really have to respect.
And even then, it's not all that dangerous.
Yep.
It's not a it's not a sorry, stone torn. It's not a maw crusher.
Yeah.
It's going to do its job, and you're probably gonna kill it in a turn or two.
Hmm. There are.
In yeah, in a similar vein of looks cool, plays badly, we've got the Leviathan, probably one of the coolest monsters in the game.
Yeah, it's like, it's such a beautiful sculpt.
Mm,
And it's not bad. Like, it gives cover saves to Idoneth that are wholly within 12 of it. But you already start battle round one as though you were in cover if you're just using the regular whatever.
and it's
So one of
not
its
as
whole
fast
big
as your
effects.
eels.
Yeah. So it's just kind of meh. Um,
Its attacks
it's
are
got a
kind
3+
of
save and 16 wounds.
mm, so it's tanky enough,
Yeah, yeah.
but its
Um,
damage is okay at best.
yeah, the main problem is its big damage is a single attack that does d6 damage. Like it's
Oh,
twos and twos, Rend 2, so it's very consistent. But then
provided
it's
yeah, I
D6.
don't roll a one.
Yeah. So I mean, what you'll do
Three
three and a
point five
half
on
average.
average, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then the sides are okay, but everything else is Rend 1 or no Rend. So for the meta right now, like you just don't care.
Mm. And
Uh,
yeah, this is. Should we just go through all the things that look really cool but aren't worth playing?
yeah, let's do that. Soul Render looks amazing. Uh, it's one of the little wizard heroes. Actually, I don't think it's a wizard. It's just a support hero. But it's awful because Namarati are awful. Namarati look amazing, and they're also awful.
Well, that's the thing. They look good at face value because they've got this great mechanic that lets them switch up how they fight. So when they're
Yes.
fighting different things, they're more powerful, which is
Hmm.
great and looks good. The problem is they're on 32s, and they have
And they're a 5+ save.
1 inch reach
Yep.
on
Uh,
halberds.
like 2 attacks, threes and threes, Rend 1 damage. When they came out, they were one of the best battle line options.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
on a
even
purely stat basis.
and
But
even now, if they had the 2 inch reach that their weapon implies, they'd be good.
oh yeah, yeah. But a 5+ save, meaning they're
Made
a
out of
kamikaze
glass,
unit. Yeah, they're like Marauders, but worse. Because Marauders end up being almost exactly the same thing,
but
but on
way more
25s
damage and on 25s.
and way more consistent charging.
Yeah.
Like they deplete quicker, in that they diminish faster and lose their bonuses faster.
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah. The thing
uh,
is, I used to be like when I was first starting this game and didn't know how it worked. I was actually really scared of Namarti thralls because warriors were so crap,
mm,
and I was being charged and completely wrapped because of lucky rolls by
mm,
an entire block of Namarti thralls, and they'd win in the
the just
grind.
Rick.
They wouldn't kill me because they don't do enough damage to just kill me, but
Yeah, yeah.
they'd win the grind. And so early on, I was actually afraid of these things when I really shouldn't have been.
What is possibly the coolest looking hero in all of Warhammerdom is Lotan, Warden of the Soul Ledgers,
Oh, poor Lotan.
because he's got an octopus friend. I love that
Oh,
model.
it's such a good one. It's like everyone likes to say dynamic with models because
Yeah, yeah.
that's the go-to word when there's a lot going on in a model, and this one definitely has it. It really looks cool, but he doesn't do anything.
He literally doesn't do anything. Like he doesn't do any damage in fighting. Uh, and he does nothing. Like he adds one to bravery for an army that doesn't care about bravery, and he lets Namarati, the things that are bad, reroll hit rolls of 1. Like he's
He can't take an artifact. He's
yeah, because he's named,
more
so you can't even
expensive.
give him Cloak of Midnight.
He's not a wizard.
Yep.
Your prayers are bad.
Yeah, he's bad. Uh,
I mean, he can buff Reavers, and Reavers aren't the
are
worst
okay.
things ever.
Yeah. Out of units that were actually, this isn't even true. Alopexes are the Achillean sharks. Uh, they were bad because ills were so much better than them,
And they were just
but they were fine.
way too expensive. Just way too expensive.
Yeah, but they were fine. Like they were better than a bunch of other cavalry for their point cost.
Hmm.
Like I kind of viewed them as a chariot, in terms of like what things they were similar to. So they were like just a better chariot. Um, but now they're great. Like for the
Still,
point decreases,
yeah. What were they at launch? They were like 140 each.
I think they were 160.
Oh yeah, nope.
Yeah.
Not for a
Um,
single shot.
yeah, and 8 wounds with a 4+ save. But they are 12-inch movement, and I put a premium on movement.
Hmm.
But ills were
16.
fast too. So like there just wasn't any reason to run them for what they did for the army. But now they're worth running with the point decreases.
Mm.
Um, like if I were going to collect an Idoneth army, uh, it would be sharks. I would bring minimum battle lines and sharks. It wouldn't be a good army,
It'd be a
but it
fun
would be good
army.
enough. And they're sharks. Uh,
Yeah. Granted, we play Seraphon. For the longest time, we were just rule of cool. So we have a great appreciation for aesthetic.
yeah.
But
Uh,
yeah, they're all solid in melee. To be perfectly honest, they're
yeah, and
yeah, the
the
range is there, but eh.
yeah, I mean, it'll help kill enemy wizards that have 5+ saves.
Mhm.
Like 24-inch, 3 shot, threes and threes, no rend, 1 damage. Um, over the course of the game, you'll kill some wizards. And if you have like 12 of them, that shooting will add up when you're trying to pick off support heroes. Not that you're going to run into that unless you play me and I start collecting Idoneth. Um,
I mean, there have been a couple of um, big shark lists in tournaments before they shut down, where people just played sharks because they love sharks. So it's going to be
yeah.
more common than you think. But
Oh, that's fair.
yeah,
Uh,
another of their units that's just okay, not great, not as bad as everything else, is their Reavers.
mhm.
This is their ranged unit. It's they have two profiles. One when they're far away, which is terrible, and one when they're up close, which is okay.
Mhm.
So closing with them, they do have an 18-inch range, but at fours and fours, no rend, it's not great. And at
Especially
nine,
since they're 1 shot each.
mm, and at 9 inches, when it triples, doesn't it?
Mhm.
That's not bad, but they're within 9 inches. So be
Yeah.
aware of them. They can, like we said, Lotan can buff them. Oh lord,
Yeah.
but you're probably not going to see these guys either, even though this isn't the worst shooting in the game.
Yeah, they used to be pretty good. Um, but now shooting exists in Sigmar. Like it was there, but
Yeah, they were good
it was,
back when Skinks were the only real shooting unit, and
yeah,
Skinks were terrible.
yep. Yeah, it was like skinks and judicators and long strike crossbows
Ew.
and reavers. uh but yeah, now
Say
they're
lovey.
eh.
Yep. You won't see them because they're and this book has something really awesome that we're about to get into, but they're
Yeah.
there.
So the meat of the army is actually the hero support. It's what makes the Alpha Strike
Yeah,
possible.
works so well.
Um,
We have a
you have
Kellian King, and if they want to bump it up, Volturnos,
Volturnus.
who is
The
out.
only difference you need to be aware of is Volturnus gets an extra wound, and his command ability. So the command ability is important.
Mm-hmm.
They choose a unit of Idoneth Deepkin that's wholly within 12, and add one to the attack characteristics of all melee weapons used by that unit. This matters because ills have a bunch of weapon profiles,
Yep.
so it ends up being like +3 attacks to each of them.
And
If they take
unlike a lot of
Volturnus,
command abilities, this stacks. It
yes,
still
so they can
stacks,
spam it.
which is
Uh,
probably why they still do well.
yes, Volturnos you pick 3 units instead of only one. So Volturnos, you will definitely see show up. I think more so now that you don't have to take a battalion in order to like try
He's
and
so
get the malign sorcery artifacts.
yep. He's really good and a really fun model. This is
Mhm.
one of their models that looks cool and plays well. And
The other one that you see pretty often is the Ishrin Tidecaster. It's a wizard. It's got a cool spell that we'll totally go over. But the big reason people take it is because it has
it flips the tides.
it flips the tides and it has uh oh nope, that's the other guy that can do
Yeah,
that as
that's the
well.
Soul Scryer.
I thought this would also let you deep strike, but it doesn't.
Nah.
But yeah, it flips the tide table, which is huge. Its
Mm-hmm.
spell has crazy good value. It's cast on a 7. You pick an enemy unit with an 18 to the caster invisible. Until your next hero phase, subtract 1 from hit rolls from that unit
Oh
as
man,
the start.
not as
And
bad
take 2
now as it
motivation.
was once upon a time, back when warriors hit on fours and there was no way to buff them. But
Yes. Well, and
it,
when like things that did things on 6s weren't unmodified.
yeah.
Um,
But
yeah.
yeah, this is a good ability. It's half of Starlight, and Starlight is awesome.
Yep. The spell that you will probably see them take in addition, and this will matter because it's going to be the spell you're going to get hit with turn one, is Arcane Corrosion
Yeah, it's a
because it has a
long range sniping.
48-inch casting range. Um, and if they're more than 12 away, the target takes a mortal wound. If they're more than 24, they take two mortal wounds. If they're more than 36, they take three mortal wounds. If they're more than 36, they take four mortal wounds.
Yep,
And it goes off on a six. So
it's
expect a skink star priest to maybe die if you can unbind it.
mm,
Um,
you can because you're Seraphon, but it's a thing to
exactly.
be aware of.
Yep.
But yeah, the other one is Soulscryer. This is what allows them to deep strike. He takes a
Yeah.
bunch of people and starts off the board and then hops in and says hello and then you die.
Yep. And it's your standard deep strike. They do have to come out on the table edge, so this is really important. Uh, they have to be more than 9 inches away. They have to be wholly within 6 inches of the table edge. And then they have to be wholly within 12 inches of the Soul Scryer as well when it's set up.
Hmm.
So, one of the major things to be aware of when you're playing against Idoneth is how to zone and control the table edges so that where they charge is limited. But
Hmm.
that's easier said than done
Yeah, back when
because of
I
the other ability.
right. Yeah, back when I started, I would just line an entire row of skinks up 6 inches from the edge of the board.
Mm. But the other thing, and this is actually what makes Soul Scryers crazy, because it's important to note that what I'm about to read stacks. Seeker of Souls is an ability that they use at the start of the charge phase. You pick one enemy unit within 24 inches of the Soul Scryer, so it's a huge range,
Hmm.
and it has to be visible. If you do so, add 3 inches to the charge roll for friendly Idoneth units that are within 12 of that unit.
Hello, deep strike. Hello, now you're dead.
Yeah. So what you would frequently see is two Soul Scryers that are deep striking with ills and getting +6 to charge. They're 9 inches away. Ills get +1 to charge because they have +1 to charge. So they're only felling on a double one. Ills can also reroll charge rolls.
Yep.
So it basically made for a guaranteed charge with ills. It's the most consistent alpha strike, even more so than the old Ripperdactyl Shadow Strike. Um,
And we only had 3 inches to
three
cover.
inches, yeah. But if we rolled double ones, we didn't have anyone nearby to command point potentially.
Mm.
Uh,
And,
if they
and
roll double ones, they just get to re-roll it for free.
yep. And eels are much better at recovering from failure than rippers ever
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
And now rippers are
Um,
worse. Oh well. Speaking of which, we've been dancing around this problem this whole time because Idoneth are this unit, but let's talk
mhm.
eels.
Yeah. There's two types. They're both good,
The punchy
and
one
chances
and the
are
not
both of them
punchy
will be
one.
in the army.
Yep.
So there's the Morsar. Both ills have the same basic stat roll: 14-inch movement, 4+ save, 6 bravery, 4 wounds. They come in increments of units of 3. I most frequently encounter them in units of 6, but you never know; it could be anything. They don't,
6 is standard for Cav because
yeah, because
easy to
they're base
use.
size, and they fly, which is important.
Very.
14-inch movement and fly. Um, yeah. Uh,
They fly, they
so
hit hard. These are the ones with Rend.
yeah. So there's
Damage 2, Rend 2 on the charge.
yes. Their lances are 2 attacks each, threes and threes, 2 inch range, so they can fight in rank if they're turned sideways.
Uh huh.
Um, yeah, Ren 2 damage on the charge, super good. The main and they've got a bunch of attacks. They've or attack profiles. They've got their Fanged Maw on the ill, which is a 1/3/3 D3. Then they've got the Lashing Tail, which is a D3/3/3/1. Um, so when there's the king there to give them +1 attack to all of those,
So
it's
their
exponential.
super dangerous spear is more dangerous than their
Yep.
bites and tails are more dangerous but less
Numerous.
so.
Yep. The big thing to be aware of for them is Biovoltic Blast. It's once per battle. It happens at the start of the combat phase, which is huge because it used to preempt a bunch of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and this was furthering the whole initiative battle. You can say they're going to unleash their biovoltic blast. If you do so, you roll a dice for each model that's in the Morsar ill unit, not for the target unit.
Yep.
Um, if you roll a one for that dice, nothing happens. Uh, on a 3+, the unit that you target takes a mortal wound, and then for each 6, it takes D3 mortal wounds. It's important because this is measured based on unit, not based on model.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as they get one of their ills, which have 14-inch movement and fly, uh, within range of the target, they can blast it. So
Yep.
they can have one ill that spans the gap of your skink screen
And
uh,
hits your poor hero, and
and
then he
hits Croak.
dies.
Yeah, exactly. And
Well,
now you're
I wouldn't
taking.
worry about Croak. He's got an after save, and this isn't enough damage to hurt him too badly. But
Yeah, there's in theory Sars Guard and other things. But whatever is your thing that you want to keep alive, they're going after it. Also, if there's 2 units of them, because they're deep striking 2 units of 6, and they've got plus 6 to charge for both of those units because of the way the buff works.
hmm,
Um, 6 ills can definitely kill Croak if you haven't had the chance to get like Bellwind up to get your extra save and all that stuff. Um,
yeah, so you don't
or
want
they
to
can,
just charge
yeah,
right into him, and they can do
exactly.
that because again, they charge super far, they fly, they do
Yep.
solid, really solid damage on the charge without
Yeah,
the
exactly.
downside.
So if they're able to, at the start of the combat phase, throw out a bunch of mortal wounds and blow up some of your Saurus Guard, now you don't have those Saurus Guard to use for when they do their crazy amount of attacks that you don't have Bellwind Vortex up. So now you're looking at a 5+ save to save you from 2 damage each. Um, like it's very scary. This is what used to win them games.
It
Was
still
was
wins
this?
some games. These
Oh,
guys
for sure.
can,
Yeah.
especially now with so much support heroes being important to an army's viability, the fact that they can just pop over and make half your army significantly less scary is still really good.
Yeah. Well, and they're real scary for KO because they can deep strike, point, get the
Wrap their ship.
charge, surround, pop their ship, and then everything inside dies.
Hmm.
Um,
But the other one is Ishrin Guard. This is the
yeah.
really tanky one. Specifically because they're old Bastillodons.
Yes.
They're immune to
With a
rend.
14-inch move that can fly.
Yeah. And actually hit pretty decently as well.
And they have a 3+ save instead of a 4+ save. Um, and at
Yeah.
4 wounds a model, like that's pretty solid. And
Yeah, they get +1
you
to their
put
saves when
this.
they charge, don't they?
Hmm?
Yeah, they get +1 to their saves when they charge, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If they made a charge, so they end up at a 3+.
So yeah, they're Bastillodons, and
Yeah.
only better.
What's also important to note is remember they have the whole cloud of or nightmare, forgotten nightmare rule, where you have to shoot at the thing that's closest. And part of what makes shooting good is it typically has rend attached to it,
Well,
and they
yeah,
ignore the
and you
rend.
can target who you want. Ranged is so good because you can bypass the grind and hit the things that are important that are hiding in the
Exactly.
back.
Yeah, it lets you surgically remove what you want to. And those two, the biovetic barrier, which is what makes them rend immune, uh, combined with having to shoot them, defangs a lot of shooting. Not as much for us, but it definitely devalues stegodons and salamanders
Skinks.
and skinks don't have the rend though.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's still you're putting all that shooting that you want elsewhere into these guys.
oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And they're quick enough to where they'll be able to dictate
yeah, they'll always be
what
in
you
the
have
way.
access to shoot for a lot of the game. Um, yeah, so they're those are the 2 units, the ill units that make up the
80% of
majority
an
of Idoneth
Idoneth
armies.
list.
Yep.
Yep,
You used to see some weird things like Glade Guard were frequently thrown into Idoneth list,
because when they
and
are
some
in
other things.
yeah, because they have a faction or is it a battalion that lets allies use their Tides of Death effect.
Exactly, yeah. So
And
sometimes you'd see those. That was for the Iron Rack
mhm,
sub faction.
yeah,
Uh,
and Glade Guard are really good when in cover,
exactly.
and
And
there are so many ways to put them in cover
they
with
didn't
this.
have anything that they could leave behind on objectives. And there, like, another thing to remember is when this came out, there was kind of a deep strike meta going on. Because you had the whole Gabriel Brightheart thing for Stormcast Eternals, where they were doing the crazy charge bomb from the heavens with the Vanguard Brotherhood and
Yeah,
uh,
never great, but a lot of
whatever.
fun.
Well, and like it wasn't bad. Like it won tournaments. It won two LVOs in a row um,
Yep,
at the start of.
you had our
Uh,
Ripperdactyls back before, well, when they were okay.
yep.
You had
Uh, there was the Nurgle Deep Strike as well when this came out, where people were doing the like 10 to 15 Blight Kings. Um, so there was sort of like this weird deep strike meta that was going on. Some people were even running Sile Eski from Forge World in order to deep strike like a bunch of Marauders or Chaos Warriors or whatever else. Like there's just this kind of weird deep strike meta that was going on, and then Idoneth came out and we're just like, we own the meta for deep strike. Go away.
yeah, everyone just thought it's not worth it,
Yep.
especially
Yep.
because deep striking requires you to keep most of your army off the field.
Yeah. Oh, and Iron Jaws was doing their whole like,
Uh,
um,
Hand of Gork,
yeah, yeah. So
back when Iron Jaws wasn't really anything to speak of, but still, they could do it.
yeah, back when they were their own single book, and but I mean, you got like what, a +6 to cast if you stacked all your units up right around your shaman.
Oh, that was fun. Not
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, there's no real targets you want to take out in an Idoneth army because the things you want to kill are their entire army,
Yeah, it's either off the table and you can't kill it because they're deep striking it.
and by the time it's on the
Uh,
table, it doesn't matter.
exactly. The thing that's frequently on the table that you want to kill right away, if you can, which we have an easier time doing it because we've got Lords of Space and Time.
Mm-hmm.
And we have crazy good movement on Skinks and Fangs of Sotek. But the thing you want to kill is the Achillean King. You
You really,
don't want.
yeah, before turn or 2 or 3, depending on whether
Yep.
they have the general, you want Volturnos dead because he can make that turn even more painful.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
he's not terribly easy to kill. So, eh. If you can, kill the king. Otherwise, it's just a grind against eels.
Yep. And this is like one of those armies where we really have to play the table against. Um, the Biovol or the combat ills are the ones that you want to deal with first. They're the bigger threat. You really don't care about their soul scryers after they've done their deep strike.
And you can't
Like they're
kill them
still
before that.
impactful because they've got a huge range, like 24 inches. They can still pick things, especially when they're in the run and retreat charge phase. Um, they can still matter. So like you don't want to wholly ignore them. But the thing that you want to focus on and grind down are their damages.
Hmm.
Um,
Now that we have damage, this is perfectly viable. You just have to
yep,
survive that first charge.
yep.
The thing I found most
Um,
effective is to layer your screens. You don't want just one, they'll hop right over it. You want
yep.
2 screens within 4 inches of each other.
And what's also rough is if they choose to go first, if they're like, yeah, I'm going to take the alpha strike and try and make the most of it, which I don't think is the best move the majority of the time for Idoneth,
Hmm.
but it can definitely work. And if you misdeploy, if you make a mistake,
Or if they
they
force you to miss
100%
deploy
can
because
crit you.
ships.
Yeah, exactly. They can definitely hurt you severely from it. Um, but chances are we aren't going to have the command points at the start if we haven't had a turn in order to be able to auto pass battle shock,
So they'll
in
pop one of your
order to
40s.
do parting shot, like all the different things that our army toolkits for, uh, we can't do. Like they can alpha strike us. So especially if you're running like your standard kind of blobby Fangs of Sotek list where you've got anywhere from 80 to 120 skinks, um, plan on sacrificing at minimum one of those blobs. Like
Probably two.
just make a wall. Um,
Yeah, you could just make this big loopy donut to cover your
exactly.
entire army
Yeah.
with a 40. Yeah.
Like just do that. Um, because you're going to have enough left over, especially if you're running Croak. You have the spell superiority as a Seraphon player against Idoneth. If you're running Croak and they come in and Croak stays alive, they do other stuff. They've got a bunch of units now that are suddenly in range. They've got the Soul Scryers. They've got at least 2 units of Ills. You're going to be dumping mortal wounds on them.
Mm.
Um,
Heck, hmm. You know, I
and then
think
you throw
that
out like your bound Geminids. Our counter hit is really strong against Idoneth
yeah,
because they got to come to us.
yeah, if you survive the Alpha Strike, you're good.
Exactly.
Actually, if they give you first turn, it might be worth it to bait Croak if you can get him on a Balewind with guard. As I
So if they give you first turn, if I'm especially if I'm playing like Fangs of Sotek,
Mhm.
and they give me first turn, I'm bringing Chameleon Skinks because I love them anyways. I run 20 Chameleon Skinks in pretty much all my lists now. Um, which I know not everyone's on board with Chameleon Skinks, but I love everything they do.
We're both on
Um,
such unconventional armies, it's insane.
I like if I owned them, I could be convinced to run 60 Chameleon Skinks and Fangs of Sotek.
Well, you're
Um,
about to get the option of running a really cool looking one, so you might
I
have
know,
at least
right?
10 more.
But yeah, especially if you're running like Fangs of Sotek and they give you first turn, you've got the movement, you've got the reach, you've got the damage. You should kill their uh, Tide caster and their king. Um, Killing those two heroes
Makes
and
things a
getting into the mid
lot
and
easier.
backfield will make their game very rough. Like be aggressive with your first turn. Um, if they give you first turn. So a lot of it's going to come down to deployment. Like you want to deploy in such a way that you can weather their alpha strike, which means sacrificing 1 to 2 blobs of skinks, and then trusting your spell casting to carry you. Because honestly, it can. Like between bound Geminids, between Croak, uh, you're just going to go off on them.
Mhm.
Um,
Whatever defensive buffs you have, it's yeah. If you can get past the first turn of combat, you're fine.
yep,
Idoneth are intimidating. They are very difficult for new players because they just seem unfair. Like you can't
yep.
dictate terms, and you
Well,
can't,
and they
but
they
you can make it
were,
easy.
man, when they first came out. Ugh.
I know, right? Playing against them with the old book was just a chore,
Yep,
but less so now.
yep.
And I'm going to be honest. Next time I actually get to play against my old nemesis who runs these guys, I'm going to look forward to shoving 30 spearmen down his throat.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they can't. So that's the other thing, right? If you're not playing Fangs of Sotek, if you're playing Coalesced, you
Or
won.
or in my
Like,
case, Dracothian Saurus.
yeah, yeah. But like if you're playing Coalesced and they show up with Idoneth, you won because you don't care about them charging you. They're still going to do mortal wounds, but you've got so many bodies and Saurus, you just don't care. Like it's not enough to
Mm-hmm.
matter. You don't care if they kill your hero support. Like it matters some, but your units are still effective. You're just going to shred them. Like they don't have the bodies. You're just going to tear them apart if you're coalesced.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have other difficult parts in other phases of the tournament. Like I don't know how coalesced beats KO, if it's a competent KO player, but
By praying to the great god of dice that they only roll ones.
only roll twos. They can re-roll those ones.
Right? Crap.
uh,
Oh dear. But yeah, they're a boogeyman, but they aren't insurmountable.
mhm. Yeah, be put your cognitive strain and effort into deployment. If you deploy correctly, you should win the matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would say Seraphon is the superior army, hands down.
Yep. Well, to be fair, we came out almost 2 years after them.
Yeah, I know, right?
There's a bit of a disparity, and the fact that they're still able to compete so well is good for them.
Yeah. No, they're like I like the army. I love the aesthetic. I would totally play a shark army.
They're so
Uh,
pretty.
but I also played a chariot. I own, and this is embarrassing, 18 chaos chariots.
Oh no.
Because I played chariot army for fun back when chariots were 80 points.
Mm.
Um, and it was awful. I mean, I won with it because it's a huge base on a model. When you have 18 of them,
And you can
that's
just
an
block out.
impressive amount of table you can soak up. But that was all the army did. Uh, but your battalion made you like 2 drops, so it wasn't bad. I mean, it was bad, but you
It
could do it.
wasn't the worst.
Um,
Uh, is there
but
anything?
I don't know. I like that type of thing, so I would totally play a shark army. I think you can win with a shark army.
I mean,
Uh,
definitely now that they're just 100 points apiece, that's not bad.
yeah. I
But
mean, that's why in my mind it's just a chariot, because it's a big base. It's got some decent stats. It's in that like 100 point ish range.
mm,
Um, Now chaos chariots make me so sad.
well,
On another side of a tangent.
oh well. Is there anything else about Idoneth we need to cover?
No, I think that's everything.
Well then, I need to rest up because giants are on the horizon, and
I am so excited.
I'm less excited, but it's still gonna be fun. Alrighty, you all have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Bye bye.